I started with a lot of silver prototypes. I went through a lot of different designs trying to make more traditional settings before I settled on something that I could forge. At first, I thought I would be able to forge a traditional prong setting, and that turned out to not be the case pretty quickly. And so I spent a long time making stamps and punches to try to mold the shape of the stone, and eventually I came up with this and kind of gave up on that. I used my welder and this graphite crucible to melt the metal. This is silver casting grain, but I also use it to alloy the gold. I had two main objectives with this ring. The first was to make something that I physically actually made with my hands. I didn't want to 3D print a design and then cast it. The second was that I wanted the gold to be as pure and deep 24 karat colored as I could get. Typically engagement rings are 18 karat at the most, but she really likes the color of pure gold, and I wanted to see if I could use special alloys and forging to make it as fine as possible. Once I knew I could melt metal with the welder and that forging it was working at least somewhat well and I had some silver prototypes, it was time to try gold. I knew I was going to be working with small alloy percentages in a small amount of metal, so I weighed these out on a precision balance at work and took them home in labeled bags. The first alloy system I actually tried was using cobalt. All the papers I read about the titanium gold said that the titanium needed to be added under vacuum, and I found a paper about cobalt gold, which used a little bit more cobalt than 1%, but it seemed like it could be added under a more oxidizing environment. I ended up with about 1.2% cobalt based on the amount of weight the part gained, and this is what it looked like after hammering the nugget a little bit. After aging, it was about 95 Vickers, and I wasn't super happy with the color. It kind of turned into a brassy color. It also formed this really heavy oxide. I did end up making a ring out of it anyways, just mostly as practice, but I didn't really try to finish it or anything. This was before I had finalized the design in silver and figured out what I actually wanted to do. After a while of thinking and waiting and practicing more with silver, I decided I was going to give a shot with the titanium. I held titanium wire with pliers and injected it into the molten puddle like you would add filler metal to a weld. A lot of the times you'll read papers and they'll say it must be done with this method or under argon or whatever, and sometimes they're dealing with longer cycle times or just different processing conditions, and you can actually get away with a little bit more than it would seem to indicate. This is what the first melt bead looked like after adding the titanium. You can see there's some like a crinkly scale. It's very distinctive of titanium oxide scale. The piece came out very sound and it seemed to forge really well, so I went ahead and made a test block and heat treated it. I was trying to target a hardness of about 150 Vickers. This came out at 50 Vickers in the O condition, and it was about 110 to 140 Vickers after aging, depending on how much cold work the region had seen. That's awesome. I think I got gold on my tungsten. I did dip the tungsten into the gold one time. Yeah, I did too much. I think what I'm showing here is my second attempt at melting the gold. I had made a ring with the first gold bead, but it came out a little bit too big, and when I tried to set the stone, the ring yielded and didn't clamp very hard. I decided that I needed to cold work the ring band after heat treatment to get the hardness high enough. I was worried I was going to lose titanium content remelting, and so I wanted to add a little bit more, but I added too much. So ugly. Might have added too much. See how it goes. Ooh, that's a lot harder. Oh crap. Okay. Crap. we will, in fact, have to start fresh. The titanium has zero solubility in the gold at room temperature, and that's what precipitates out as little intermetallics when you precipitation heat treat it. But if you add too much titanium, you get bulk intermetallics and the whole thing falls apart. I'll have to recover that gold later, but for this I just started over with fresh gold. I don't think that went great. But I guess it could have been worse. That looks solid. A few little flakes of gold in there. I think we're better off than we were last time. Heater up. Oh my goodness. Nerve-wracking. Big hits, especially while we're hot. We want that. Pondering if I should put the marks in now. Let's see if we wrap it this way and bend up. This doesn't matter which ones. Be top and bottom. Of course they can't be. Oh, I should have measured. Be alright. Back into the fire. This is my first attempt here, and you can see the wire's too thin and the folds are not very precise. How I ended up making the final ring with work hardening after heat treat is I made the ring really undersized, and then I hammered the band on the mandrel to grow the diameter of it. One of the hardest things about that was actually making a ring small enough that had the geometry and the curvature, but still fit over the mandrel and was able to expand and become the correct size. I played around with silly stuff like bending these long tines back and trying to put some decoration in it, but decided that it was just extra snagging and didn't really add anything to the ring. This first ring was close, but didn't come out quite the right shape. It was too skinny and there's no way to make it thicker, so it got melted down. What you saw there was me sharpening a chisel point so I can put the grooves in the lands on the ring that actually hold the gemstone. So I'm chiseling them in and then I'll bend it up, and that's what's going to hold the corners of the gem. I'm using the side of the hammer because the face is polished for hammering the jewelry. You see me using a lot of Harbor Freight tools here, like the pliers and the chisels and the punch. Almost all of those have been sanded and polished and forged to be custom tools. Probably not the same as actual jeweler's tools, but at least not horribly marring up the metal. The paint on the side of the Harbor Freight anvil was actually a major nuisance, and I probably should have sanded it all off. My hand is in the way here, but I am bending those tines up to hold the gem, just freehand with the pair of pliers. I marked it with the calipers, but there was also a certain level of intuition that went into trying to bend that to the right length. You're bending a lot on that thin spot. Here I'm test fitting the gem before heat treat. How we look? We're in that groove. I think we're actually in that groove. Something that was really important here was the size. It had to be undersized before heat treatment so that I could add cold work to the ring. But this ring, essentially because of the cold work and the heat treatment and the monolithic construction, can't be resized. The only thing I could get away with was potentially making the band a little bit longer by adding a little bit more cold work after it was finished, but it can't be made smaller. Here, It's a little thin. We want to extend that and make it a little bit bigger. It should just barely fit over this knuckle, I think. You probably want it to not quite fit over this knuckle. With the ring mostly formed, it's time to heat treat. The ring is heated to a solutionizing temperature that dissolves all of the titanium into the gold. Since the alloy is just over 1% titanium, we can look at the phase diagram and see that we need to heat over 750 degrees to get everything in solution. Once the ring is at temperature, all the titanium is dissolved into the gold in solution. Quenching it locks in a supersaturated solution of titanium in gold. It's similar to making simple syrup, where you dissolve sugar in boiling water and then cool it to room temperature. After the quench, the solid solution is artificially aged at an elevated temperature, which precipitates out small intermetallic compounds. Precipitating these particles is like growing sugar crystals out of simple syrup, but instead of growing all one big crystal, they're really tiny distributed crystals in the metal. These particles are what strengthen the alloy after heat treatment. That's why it's called precipitation hardening. After some final adjustment to the shape and size, it goes into the furnace for aging. I aged at 500 degrees C for an hour. I based that on the literature I read. It all seemed to agree that that was the appropriate heat treatment for 1% titanium and gold. I hammered on the mandrel to bring the ring to final size. Once that was done, it was time to cut and then polish. I removed a decent amount of material with a file. I collected up all the shavings on a piece of paper. That was a little nerve-wracking. There were some minor forging laps, but they removed relatively easily with light filing. I didn't have to cut really, really deep. I used progressive sandpaper grits, mostly by hand. I didn't want to fling gold dust across the shop with my Dremel. The final polish I actually did do with a polishing wheel on a Dremel. I did that because I've used it a lot before and I kind of know how to use it, but it probably was not the best tool for the job. I used diamond polishing paste and also green Jeweler's Rouge. This little aluminum vise that my brother made for me a long time ago was a huge help holding the ring. Once the polish was done, I carefully spread it open with the vise and set the stone. It clicked into place pretty well. Once polish is done and the stone is set, all that's left to do is and I'm happy to report that it hasn't broken yet and she likes it a lot. Here are some pictures we took with it on her hand.